The Vancouver Canucks last year were the loudest team in recent memory in the NHL, from things like their star players fighting each other to having injuries to pretty much all the best players. And on top of that, an injury to their starting goalie that we've never seen before, and contract talks that have gone down till the very last minute with one of their homegrown talents, Brock Besser. And despite all that, they came so close to making the playoffs. So let's talk about the Canucks and preview their 25-26 season. What's going on, guys? My name is Rahul Patel and welcome back to the channel. So for those of you who don't know me, I started making content last year on the Canucks, roughly around Christmas time, making TikToks after every single game, giving my thoughts on the game and how the Canucks can, improve moving forward. As you can see, I'm wearing the jersey. I am a very big Canucks fan and I have high hopes for the new season. Now, I did make videos on the day of the Canucks games, but the problem is that I work a very interesting schedule. So I get off at 1 o'clock in the morning. And so some nights I would just be in my car making TikToks. And although that was fun for me, in terms of a production standpoint, it wasn't really the most entertaining to watch, even though the content might have been there. And so what I'm going to do moving forward is I'm going to make a review video the day following the Canucks game. And I will be posting that reaction on the YouTube channel as well as the TikTok, and that will be linked in the description below. Now, with that all being said, let's talk about the upcoming season for the Vancouver Canucks. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the starting lineup. Now, I don't want to go into the ideal lineup with everybody being healthy because we're not going to see that for a little bit with Nils Höglander being out. And so we're going to talk about the day one opening night roster against the Calgary Flames. Now, I actually want to go over the defense and goaltending first because I feel like those have less question marks than the forward group. The top pairing being Hughes and Hronek. I mean, it speaks for itself, really. We have our two best defensemen playing alongside each other. They have great chemistry. We're expecting a Norris-type season from Quinn Hughes. And Philip Hronek, we need a little bit more production from him offensively. I think we all understand that defensively, he is very sound. He'll take the odd penalty from time to time, but he is a very solid right-handed defenseman, and we just need a little bit more production from him. The second pairing, also not too many question marks. We have Marcus Pettersson with Tyler Myers. Now, ideally, on a championship contending team, Tyler Myers is probably your third pairing defenseman, but for the Canucks right now, he's on the second pair with Marcus Pettersson. Myers, he's very on and off. I mean, we saw the best of him when he was playing with Nikita Zadorov, and then we saw the worst of him when he was on the top line with Quinn Hughes, a couple seasons before we ended up picking up Hronek. So we know what we have with Tyler Myers. We need to put him in the right spots to succeed, and he needs to stop taking stupid penalties, high stickings and delay of game penalties. Now, the bottom pair is where things get very interesting. So we have Derek Forbort, which the Canucks re-signed to a one-year deal, and we have Elias Pettersson. Now, a lot of people are probably wanting Mancini or Tom Willander to have one of those spots, but I think Derek Forbort showed that on the penalty kill especially, he was excellent last year, and Elias Pettersson, I think, has stood out more so than Mancini and Willander, and so that's why he gets the opening night roster spot. Now, originally, Mancini was actually assigned to Abbotsford in the AHL, but because there was a recent injury to Joseph, Mancini gets the call up, and now he is going to be the seventh defenseman in the case of another injury. The thing is with Mancini, I feel like he just needs to hone his defensive skills. I think we all know that offensively, he is a very gifted defenseman. He was in the return for the JT Miller trade, and so there's a lot of expectation with Victor Mancini, but he's only 23 years old, so we should really take our time with developing young defensemen, especially when it comes to improving their defensive skills. And with Tom Willander, he just finished his season in college. He hasn't played a professional season yet, and people want him to play on the Canucks. I think, again, we're rushing guys into positions that they don't need to be in. I think he will play NHL games this season, but I don't think he's going to be a mainstay on the roster. I think they should play him on Abbotsford, give him top line minutes there, and see where his development goes. And when it comes to the goaltenders, we have Thatcher Demko and Kevin Lankinen. This, in my opinion, is one of, if not the best goalie tandems in the NHL if everybody stays healthy. And yes, we know with Demko, his knee, we had this weird injury last season, or 2 seasons ago, I guess you can say now, where we don't really know what it was. And it was this new injury that we've never seen before. And it really hindered him getting into the lineup. And then when he was in the lineup, he wasn't great. So we're hoping for a healthy, consistent year from Thatcher Demko. I wouldn't be surprised if the games are split like 38 to 44, I believe that's the split, for Lankinen playing most of the games, just because of Demko. Even though he might be the better goaltender, we need him available more often than not. And now going into the forward core. So this is the big question mark for the Canucks going into this season, because last season our forward core was not great. We weren't scoring goals, we weren't producing points, people were getting hurt, people were fighting each other. And so now with a new season on the horizon, it's a fresh start for a lot of these players. And let's be honest, it starts with number 40, Elias Pettersson, making $11.6 million to be our number one center. He cannot repeat what he did last season in terms of production. He needs to at the very least, have an 82-point season. Because with this lineup, there's already question marks at the center position. And if you have another question mark at your number one center position, with a guy making $11.6 million against the cap, would be a big issue. He is currently alongside Jake DeBrusk and Brock Besser. I would say probably the two best goal scorers on this team. And so this line has to work, especially the duo of Elias Pettersson and Brock Besser. Now, last season, we did see some success when they were put together after the JT Miller trade, but unfortunately, Pettersson got injured right as they were starting to pick up some chemistry with Nils Höglander. And so hopefully they can reignite that form that they found towards the end of last season heading into this one. It's actually funny, I have no concerns for Jake DeBrusk whatsoever. I'm expecting a 20-25 goal season from him, potentially 30 goals and maybe 60 points. And I think he'll comfortably get that on this team just because of his play style. It's really just the other two. We need Pettersson to really be on his game, and Brock Besser, if he can score 40, that would be great, but at least 30. Now, when it comes to the second line, it's really just a mesh of guys right now. We have Archie Bains, who did win the Calder Cup with the Abbotsford Canucks, and Philip Hedl, who is penciled in as the second line center, although for me personally, I feel like his skill sets better suit the wing. And then we have Connor Garland, who was probably the Canucks' best forward last season, if we're being totally honest, when it comes to two-way play and, actually giving an effort and not being in the drama and all that kind of stuff. Now, Archie Bains being in this position is because of the injury to Nils Höglander. He's not going to start the season on the roster. He is currently injured, and so Archie Bains takes that position from him. Now, it's very interesting because I thought Evander Kane would be on this second line. I think Evander Kane, Hedl, Garland is a very potent second line, but from preseason, we saw some success with the third line with Evander Kane, Braden Coots, who we'll get into, and Jonathan Lekromacki as well. So Archie Bains has a lot to prove this season. There's been a lot of frustration and a lot of disappointment from the Canucks fans, saying that Archie Bains isn't an NHL player, he's not good enough. So it's a big season for him. He's got to prove that he can hang, that he can be an effective player in some aspect, whether that's penalty killing or on the power play or at 5-on-5, forechecking. He just needs to find his thing, and he needs to excel at that. And Philip Hedl, he just needs to stay healthy realistically. And if he can be a good face-off guy, then the Canucks kind of have their second-line center already on the roster. They just need Hedl to provide that consistent performance. He was very good at breaking into the opponent's zone, which was something that the Canucks desperately struggle at because we're not the greatest skating team, and Philip Hedl being acquired for JT Miller was a breath of fresh air. And now we go into the third line, which is going to be probably the line to watch if you are not a Canucks fan, or if you are a Canucks fan and you're interested to see a lot of new faces in the lineup. This third line is very, very interesting. So first up, we have Evander Kane, the homecoming boy from Vancouver himself. He's going to be a physical threat. Hopefully he can score 20 goals. He didn't have the best end to his season in Edmonton. He had a lingering injury, and in the playoffs, he wasn't very useful, let's say. He was taking a lot of penalties. And so you're going to get that with Evander Kane. He takes a lot of dumb penalties. We already saw that in preseason. He took a stupid tripping penalty, coincidentally, against the Edmonton Oilers. But yeah, he is going to be somebody who you'd rather have on your team than not, because he's annoying to play against, and I feel like the Canucks were lacking that last season. Now we're going to first go to the other wing. We're going to go to Jonathan Lekromacki, who is a very talented right winger, former first round pick. He has an elite shot, but with Rick Tocchet, it just seems like it wasn't going to work out in terms of getting him into the right positions to succeed. He wasn't getting many power play opportunities. When he was in the offensive zone, he was told to forecheck more than really create plays, and it just didn't really seem like it was a stylistic match. But as we saw in preseason, he started a bit slow, but towards the end, especially his 2-goal performance against the Edmonton Oilers, 2 wicked slap shots, one-timers that go into the net, and that honestly, that one performance earned him this spot in the lineup. And if they can get maybe 15, 20 goals out of Jonathan Lekkerimäki, that would be huge for this team. And now the person that everybody is taking notice of, Braden Coots on the third line. Now, Coots was just taken in the first round in the past NHL draft, and he was somebody who, was expected to play in preseason and show his skills, and then just get sent back down to Seattle, where he's the captain and he will, develop and be a dominant force in the WHL. But he impressed so much, and the Canucks have such a need at center that he is in the day one opening night roster. I believe he led the team in point scoring for the preseason as well, so that's very impressive for an 18-year-old. I'm honestly on the fence about this because he's so young and you want him to be a player for you in the future, but you don't want to rush him in and potentially stunt his development, because when it comes to rookie players, they have about 7 games, I believe it is. It's 7 or 8 games where you play, and if you play another game after that mark, your entry-level contract, that is 3 years, will go down to 2 years. But if the team decides to send the player down before that, they'll keep the 3 years until they play more than 7 or 8 games in a professional hockey season. So there is some expectations on Coots to perform here because, again, you really need him to stand out. You need him to perform for it to be worth keeping him on the NHL roster. Now, he did have a lot of chemistry with Jonathan Lekkerimäki in the preseason, and so the Canucks are going to be hoping that translates to the NHL regular season. And right now on the fourth line, we have Drew O'Connor with Aatu Räty and Kiefer Sherwood. Now, last year, Kiefer Sherwood had an unbelievable season, probably the best of his NHL career. He led the league in hits. He set the single season record for hits. I believe he had 20 goals. And so we're looking for maybe not the same in goal scoring and overall offensive production, but in terms of being a physical presence, Kiefer Sherwood needs to keep that up. Aatu Räty is a very competent center, and he is very capable of winning faceoffs, which is probably the most important thing when it comes to being a center positionally, is winning faceoffs, and he improved in that category as the season went on last year. Now, right now, Teddy Blueger is out with an injury, or he's out for personal reasons, I'm not sure, but he's not going to be in the opening lineup. I would suspect that if Coots doesn't perform, Teddy Blueger goes into that third line spot and Aatu Räty stays on the fourth line, or if Coots does perform, then the Canucks have a very interesting decision to do with Aatu Räty, is they'll probably have to scratch him for Teddy Blueger. And Drew O'Connor was picked up last year in the Marcus Pettersson trade. And very similarly to Philip Hedl, he can really skate. And even though he might be like an above average skater on this team that doesn't have a lot of good skaters, he looks like the Flash out there realistically when he's picking up the puck in the neutral zone and attacking the net. And so we need that, as well as a good forechecking line with Kiefer Sherwood. So overall, there is a lot of narratives with this offensive core. Will Elias Pettersson return to form? Will Brock Besser, after his extension, score 40 goals again? How will Evander Kane do in his first season as a Vancouver Canuck? Braden Coots as a rookie? Philip Hedl, will he be the true second-line center that this team needs? Or will the Canucks make a trade for a second-line center? And yeah, there's just so much that's going on. But we're hoping for a quiet season in terms of drama with the Vancouver Canucks. Now, if we're looking at their cap space, their cap situation, they have just under $500,000 to work with. So not a lot of wiggle room when it comes to acquiring new players. Because like I had previously mentioned, the Canucks are actively looking for a second-line center. And second-line centers do not come cheap. And the fact that you don't have cap space on top of that is going to make it very difficult to find a player of that quality. So when it comes to acquiring new players at potentially the trade deadline or even before that, because we know this front office loves to make moves, the Canucks currently have their own first round pick and second round pick for this year's NHL draft. And for next year's draft, the 2027 draft, they have their own first round pick and third round pick. They traded away their second round pick to the Chicago Blackhawks. And so there is not a lot to use in next year's draft other than that first round pick. I don't think a third round pick is going to really fetch you a second line center. But in terms of this year's draft, there is a first and second round pick. Now, when it comes to the prospect pool, the Canucks don't have a ton to give up in terms of really good prospects, because the prospects that they do have, they're going to want to put on their roster in the near future, and you don't want to really trade those guys away. So I'm not going to go too in depth on their schedule, but if we're looking at the month of October, the Canucks have a relatively easy schedule. Now, they start off with the Calgary Flames. I think they should be able to defeat the Calgary Flames. The Edmonton Oilers are going to be pretty difficult on the Saturday coming up here. They have St. Louis on Monday, which I believe, again, they're a better team than St. Louis. Dallas is going to be difficult. Chicago should be a win. Washington might also be a difficult game because also it's going to be a 9:30 a.m. start Pacific, so they might not be used to the time change, as well as, just playing in the morning in Washington. Pittsburgh should be a win. Nashville should be a win. Montreal is going to be a fun game to watch because last season the Canucks could not defeat Montreal for their life. And then they got Edmonton again on a back-to-back, so that's going to be very difficult. The New York Rangers on October 28th is going to be the game to watch. It's going to be Pettersson versus Miller. Everybody's going to be all over that game in terms of media coverage, so that's going to be fun to watch. And then they finish the month against St. Louis. So a pretty easy schedule, I'd say. Like, there's only really the two Edmonton games, the Dallas game, and maybe the Washington game that I would be worried about if I were the Canucks. And so I feel like that they should be able to pick up a lot of points to start the season. And that's going to be very crucial. Because we saw that last season, the Canucks were unable to make the playoffs because they missed out by a couple of points. And if you look at last season, there were multiple points where the Canucks could have picked up points where they probably should have, and they end up not, and they missed the playoffs by a couple of points. So it's very crucial to get off to a good start. Everybody starts at 0 points, and if you want to return to form like you did 2 seasons ago, fighting for the President's Trophy, you need a good start. Now, to wrap the video up, I'm going to make my final prediction for the season. I believe the Canucks are going to make the playoffs. I don't think that they're going to have another season like last where there's a bunch of stuff going on. But if you really think about it, on top of all the stuff the Canucks had to deal with last season, they just barely missed the playoffs. So if anything is going to go right for Vancouver this season, they should definitely be able to make the playoffs. And it's not that I'm thinking that they're going to take this big step. They're definitely going to improve from last season because there's just so many areas where they weren't good at last season. The play of Elias Pettersson, Brock Besser's goal scoring, I feel like is just going to go up. It's going to improve this team's chances of winning hockey games. And if you look at the rest of the Pacific Division, I feel like teams have gotten worse. The LA Kings, for example, I mean, you take the Oilers to the brink last season, and how you improve your team is you sign a bunch of old defensemen, and they played their first game last night against Colorado and they lost 4-1. I know it's the Avalanche, so you might want to take that with a pinch of salt. But again, I don't think the LA Kings are going to be finishing third like a lot of people predict. I think they'll be fighting for a wild card spot. And when you look at the Calgary Flames, for example, who were also in that kind of conversation last year with the Canucks for that last playoff spot, I think they were carried by Dustin Wolf. I mean, he was a rookie goalie who contended for the Calder, got Hart votes for MVP for the season. So I just feel like it makes zero sense for that to replicate itself. And if you look at the rest of the Calgary Flames team, they didn't really improve that much either, and they might trade away Rasmus Anderson this season. And the last two teams we have, Seattle and Anaheim, in terms of teams that I've seen people put into that playoff conversation. Seattle, I just feel like haven't improved that much. They're kind of just waiting for players within their organization to take that next step. Whether or not that will happen this season is yet to be seen. The Anaheim Ducks, I don't understand why people are putting them into a playoff spot, because if you look at the Central Division, it looks like all the wildcard positions are going to be taken up from the Central. So it's really, you need to finish in the top 3 in the Pacific. And when it comes to the Pacific Division, it's Edmonton and Vegas have the top 2 spots, in my opinion. So yes, I have the Canucks finishing 3rd in the Pacific Division. I think that's realistic. I mean, in terms of, potentially winning the division, I don't think that's within reach because, Vegas picks up Mitch Marner. I know they lost Pietrangelo, so that is going to be a key loss for them. The Oilers are the Oilers, and now that McDavid signed for a stupid team-friendly contract, I think they're going to be motivated more than ever to win a Stanley Cup. And so, yeah, I think the Canucks are going to be comfortably in third place this season, and I haven't seen a lot of people say that. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. What is your prediction for the Vancouver Canucks for the 2025-26 season? And like always, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more. Peace.